I was living in Florence in 1996, and I'd walked across the Ponte Vecchio, which was the only bridge not destroyed by the Nazis when they fled the city in August 1944, and I wondered how so many of the world's great treasures survived the most destructive conflict in history, a war that claimed 65 million lives. And I didn't know what the answer was, and I wasn't embarrassed about that, but I was hugely embarrassed. It had never occurred to me to wonder, and I started asking friends of mine who were European, and they all said, "Boy, that's a great question, what's the answer?" And I said, "You live here, you should know." We have to think World War II was the most photographed, documented event in history, and the idea that there'd be this epic period during the war of all the museums closed and these remarkable men and women, museum directors, curators, art historians, artists, so many of whom had truly important connections with Harvard, whether they were students here or so many were faculty. They went through the Paul Sachs Museum Studies course at the FOG. It's just a tremendous story and a story of nobility that I think people want to know about, and it's been great and exciting for me to be able to share their experience. The works the monuments officers found hidden in salt mines and caves and castles by the thousands, several thousand hiding places alone, a number of works of art numbering into the millions that they stayed in Europe for 6 years sorting through, trying to determine what countries these things have been taken from. The policy of the Western Allies was to return objects to the countries that they were taken from, and then it was responsibility of each individual country to determine whether they belonged to an individual, a church, a museum, and so on. But the works that we're speaking of they transcend art. They're icons like the Statue of Liberty or Eiffel Tower, Michelangelo's Bruges Madonna, the again altarpiece by Jan van Eyck. There are 35 paintings in the world by Vermeer. Hitler stole 2 of them that the monuments officers found. Dozens and dozens of Rembrandts. I mean, we don't think of a painter like Rembrandt by the dozens, but this is how, these are the kinds of volumes the monuments men found them in. But it's not just paintings. 5,000 church bells from the great cathedrals throughout Europe, some 3 million library books from the most important ancient libraries throughout Europe. The list was really endless of things stolen by the Nazis, and it presented an epic challenge for the monuments officers to sort through these things and get them back. Well, one of the great periods of confusion occurs in the last month or so of the war, and the first few weeks after the war is formally over, May 8th, 1945, the war in Europe, we should say. I refer to it in the Monuments Men as the void. It's a period when the bad guys aren't in control anymore, but the good guys aren't in control yet. And in this chaotic period, it really was like survival of the fittest or the law of the West. People were doing anything, many desperate acts committed by people just trying to survive. There was a tremendous amount, maybe more so than normal, of lying. Anyone saying, well, I wasn't a Nazi, if they spoke English, it oftentimes served them in good stead because they would try and find American or British officers and point the finger somewhere else, and a lot of times the officers consider them credible. So it's a very confusing period, and in March 1945, Hitler issues this order that's considered to be the Nero Decree, instructing Albert Speer, as Minister of Armaments, to destroy all the infrastructure of the country, foodstuffs, factories, highways, etc., because he believes it's the German people's fault that they've lost this war and that they are the weaker race, referring to the Russians, the Soviet Red Army, being the stronger of the two. Speer is reluctant to execute this order because he knows it's a death sentence for the German people and pleads with the Fuhrer to change his mind. He will not do so. It did not specify works of art, and this is one of the great confusions in this period, is did Hitler intend or not to destroy the works of art which he intended for his own museum, the Fuhrer Museum? I don't believe that he did. In fact, I think he quite clearly did not want that to happen. However, in the confusion, in the last few days, there was an order that came out of the Fuhrer bunker that said, and you figure out what this means, under no circumstances are these works of art to fall into enemy hands, nor should they be destroyed. Is it either or? And this was the problem about the interpretation of this order. And the Austrian Nazis were the most fanatic. And one of these Nazi Austrians, August Eigruber, who was a mayor of the district that Hitler was from, was convinced he knew the mind of the Fuhrer and that the intention was to destroy the works of art. And he made every effort to do so by mining one of the key salt mines where these works of art were. And had it not been for the heroic efforts of a small handful of people, they would have detonated and these works of art would have been destroyed.